Where's the $2,000 I send every month for support? Mom looked totally worn out. Exhausted and my mind foggy, I could only reply, have you seen your mom's bank book? Bank book? My husband sounded utterly confused, so I sighed and pulled out a bank book that had been stored in the living room. Here, this is your mom's bank book. She dropped it here last time she visited. He took the bank book from me and checked its contents. Then, his face turned pale as he looked at me. What is this? That's what it is, I said, pointing at the bank book. Apart from transfers from my account, there were also deposits from another person. And all the money deposited was immediately transferred to another account under my mother-in-law's name. My husband slumped down, seemingly devoid of all strength. However, he quickly stood up, looked me straight in the eye, and began to speak. Let's go and check with Mom directly. My name is Linda, a 42-year-old office worker. I've been married for about 2 years to my husband, Mark, who is 3 years my junior. We have worked at the same company for over 10 years, but until recently, we were just colleagues. However, we were assigned to the same project by chance, and spending so much time together brought my husband and I closer. After the project was completed, he asked me out for dinner and then confessed his feelings. Honestly, I've always been a workaholic with little interest in marriage. I had relationships when I was younger, but they always ended because of my work priorities, and by my mid-30s, I had accepted that marriage might not be for me. Despite knowing this, Mark wanted to be with me and even prepared a ring for what was supposed to be just a dinner. Moved by his sincerity, I suggested we start dating, and our relationship began. As we talked more about our families, I saw Mark's kindness and how he supported my work, leading me to propose to him. The ring he initially prepared became our wedding band. Mark's father disappeared one day, leaving his mother, Susan, to raise him alone. As a widow with no job experience, Susan struggled to find good work and juggled multiple jobs to make ends meet. When Mark started working, Susan's health declined, preventing her from working long hours. And she now manages on a small part-time income in an old apartment. Mark, due to his job's frequent relocations, moved out but worried about his mother, who couldn't work much, and sent her $1,500 monthly. Even after switching jobs, he continued the support. He once offered to live with her since his company was near her home, but she refused, not wanting to intrude on his privacy. Indeed, when we got married, my husband suddenly suggested living with his mother, but she refused, saying she didn't want to intrude on our newlywed life. I was taken aback by the idea of living together, but honestly, I felt relieved when she declined from her side. I believe she's a good person, but the thought of living together, right after getting married, was a bit unsettling. Upon returning home, I voiced my concern to my husband for not consulting me before offering to live with his mother. And we promised to discuss such matters together in the future. Understanding that he was just worried about his mother, I suggested we keep in touch regularly and visit her on weekends. After discussing it, we decided to increase the support to $2,000, working together as a couple. Susan was overjoyed, and we both worked hard, hoping she could enjoy a comfortable retirement. However, her situation didn't seem to improve, and she began calling monthly, asking about the deposit. At first, we understood her situation, but the frequent, ungrateful calls became disheartening. Instead of calling with an apology, she'd bluntly ask, "Have you made the deposit?" as if it were a given. While I doubt my mother-in-law meant any harm, her approach bothered me, and I couldn't help but complain to my husband. "Hey, doesn't your mom call to remind us about the deposit every month? It feels a bit, when she does that without even a thank you. Come on, you don't have to say like that. Mom's having a tough time because she can't work." My complaint seemed to have struck a nerve. Uncharacteristically, my husband raised his voice in response. Since then, any attempt to discuss the financial support for his mother would often lead to him becoming stubborn and unyielding. I can't help but wonder how long we'll have to continue sending money to his mother. Though I feel guilty, that thought keeps crossing my mind. My husband probably noticed my feelings, and that's why he acted that way. Thinking about it made me feel like I was being cold, so I couldn't press the issue further. About 2 years after we started sending support money after getting married, my husband received a call from his mother. Listening to his Uh-huh. I could tell from his gloomy expression that it wasn't good news. What? Scammed. I was so shocked by my husband's words that I jumped up from my chair. I thought his mother was a very capable person, despite her frail health, and I was immediately concerned about how much she had lost. What did Susan say? I asked my husband after he hung up the phone. With a somber look, he began to relay the call's content. It seems Mom got scammed. She got an email, clicked on a URL, and it automatically said she was registered and needed to pay, so she did. That's a one-click scam. Why didn't she say anything when it happened? My remark made my husband's eyebrows shoot up. Maybe I was too harsh. But what's done is done. You've been cold to her lately, so she didn't feel she could talk to you. She was so troubled that she took out a loan to pay it off. And now she can't pay this month's rent or water bill, so she asked if we could increase the support money. He said, then pulled out his bank book and started calculating. Maybe I had been a bit distant in response to the persistent calls, but to be blamed like this. We need to do something about her debt. I brought over my bank book and sat next to my husband. How much is Susan's debt? She said it's around $250,000. We need to do something. I was speechless at the amount my husband mentioned. Where could she have borrowed such a large sum, especially without a house to her name? It's unlikely that a bank would lend such a large sum to my mother-in-law, who doesn't own a house. This raises the possibility that she might have borrowed from some dubious sources. I made up my mind and spoke to my husband. Let's just pay off the debt all at once. My husband turned to me, taken aback by my suggestion. He probably never expected me to propose such a thing. I met his gaze and continued. Think about it, if she could get that much money so quickly, it's unlikely from a bank. We need to pay it back fast. Or the interest will just keep growing. He seemed convinced and nodded repeatedly. Thanks to being frugal and having saved up during our single years, we had a decent amount of savings. Mark had also saved a considerable amount, so we decided to split his mother's debt and pay it off. He thanked me repeatedly. When we contacted his mother about the repayment, she kept thanking us over the phone. I could hear her sniffle, possibly from crying. It was a lot of money, but at least the debt was paid off, and we made her promise to consult us from now on, so we decided to let it go this time. However, something didn't sit right with me. When Mark took the money to his mother, she never revealed where she borrowed it from. He insisted on knowing since we were paying, but she only said she forgot the company's name and that they would come to collect the money directly, thanking us without giving any details. Maybe she's starting to get a bit forgetful. Worried, I suggested that we accompany her to the doctor next time. But she's stubbornly against going to hospitals. So we had to come up with a plan to get her to one. Just as we almost finished planning how to take her to the hospital, Mark's phone rang. It was a call from his aunt, Emily, who lives far away. Mark, it's been a while. Do you have a moment? Hi, Emily, it's been a long time. What's up? Emily is my mother-in-law's sister. She's a very reliable person, married into a family of landowners, and manages their estate. She despises dishonesty and can be strict, but she's always been kind to her nephew, my husband, and me, his wife. Susan called me. She said she needed to borrow some money. Are you guys sending her the monthly support? She mentioned she's been struggling to pay her electric bill for months. We were taken aback by this. We've always sent the monthly support, and we had just paid off her debt. After thanking Emily, we hurriedly contacted my mother-in-law and brought her to our house. She arrived with unkempt hair and wearing an old shirt, clearly looking like she was struggling financially. Mom, Emily said you asked her to lend you money. Why didn't you tell us? Oh, I didn't say that. She asked how I was doing, and I just said I'm not as well off as you guys, but living normally. Her expression didn't seem deceitful, so we exchanged puzzled looks. Could Emily have misunderstood something? Maybe a complaint sounded like a request for money. We reassured Emily that we were sending the support and managed to convince her. Does she have any other debts? Should we increase the support money? Susan isn't saying anything, is she? Maybe we should check her income and expenses next time. She might have signed up for something without realizing. Let's decide on increasing the support after that. My husband agreed with a nod. I put our bank books back in the drawer and finished up the household chores. A few days later, my husband went to visit his mother alone since I had to work on the weekend. I asked him to subtly bring up the idea of visiting the doctor, and then I headed to work. I was so busy with a work trouble that I couldn't even take lunch, but I managed to send a message asking, "How was your mom?" I had a missed call from my husband in the evening, but I only noticed it on my way home after work had ended. The absence of a message suggested it might be something important that needed to be discussed directly. Thinking this, I quickly messaged, "I'll be home in 10 minutes, and hurried back. I'm home. As I opened the door, I found my husband standing there, red-faced with anger. Sorry, I couldn't answer the phone. How was your mom? At my words, his anger intensified. Where's the $2,000 I send every month for support? Mom looked totally worn out. Exhausted and my mind foggy, I could only reply, "Have you seen Susan's bank book?" Bank book? He sounded completely taken aback, so I sighed and pulled out a bank book that had been stored in the living room. Here, this is Susan's bank book. She dropped it here last time she visited. He took the bank book from me and checked its contents. Then, his face turned pale as he looked at me. What is this? That's what it is, I said, pointing at the bank book. The bank book showed transfers from my account, as well as deposits from someone else. And all the money deposited was immediately transferred to another account under the Susan's name. My husband slumped down, seemingly devoid of all strength. However, he quickly stood up, looked me straight in the eye, and began to speak. Let's go and check with Mom directly. He called his mother. But she didn't answer. It was unusual for her not to pick up right away, so we decided to go to her apartment. Wait, isn't the mailbox taped shut with duct tape? As soon as we arrived at my mother-in-law's apartment, my husband said that. I couldn't believe it. But when I looked at the mailbox myself, it was indeed sealed with duct tape. What's happened to Susan? Let's ask the landlord. My husband and I decided to consult the landlord. The landlord, a friendly elderly lady, lived in the same apartment complex. From her, we learned a shocking fact. She moved to that high-rise condo, didn't she? Bragging about that her son bought it for her. I'm so jealous. We were dumbfounded. My husband is her only son. And we hadn't bought any condo. After thanking the landlord, we headed to the condo she mentioned. The condo was a newly constructed building, the tallest in the area. Even the price of the units was significantly higher than those in the surrounding condos. How did Mom manage to buy a place like this? My husband stared at the condo in disbelief. I had a bad feeling about this. Soon, we saw a figure approaching the condo. It was my mother-in-law. Unaware of our presence, she hummed a tune and skipped along with designer shopping bags in hand. Mom, what are you doing? My husband rushed towards her. She stopped in surprise, but then started walking towards the condo. My husband blocked her path. Annoyed, she looked up at him and simply asked, "What? What do you mean, what? You said you had no money. So why are you moving here? What's with the bags? Stop making such a fuss. It's a public nuisance. No matter how much money one has, it's never enough for luxury, right?" My husband trembled with anger, struggling to respond. So you've been lying. You said you couldn't work. And here I was, thinking I was repaying a debt of gratitude. Getting help from Linda to send you money. All you talk about is money. A mother's happiness is her son's happiness. If I'm happy, that should be enough for you, right? The smug, contemptuous smile on my mother-in-law's face was nothing like the woman I knew. Seeing her like this for the first time, my husband stood by me, pale as a ghost. She brushed past us, saying, "Bye now," and went inside. My husband stood there, dumbfounded. The thought that his beloved mother could betray him was unimaginable. I could feel his shock, and it was like a tight grip around my heart. I took his hand and said, "Let's get revenge." He looked at me in shock, but then nodded. We devised a plan. First, we stopped the support payments and began investigating her finances. With the help of an acquaintance, we hired a detective to track her movements and discovered she was receiving a fixed amount of money from someone every month. We contacted that person and explained the situation. 2 weeks later, my mother-in-law called my husband. "What are you meddling in?" Her angry voice could be heard even through the phone. My husband sighed and calmly replied, "What do you mean, meddling? You lied about Dad having another woman and leaving." We heard everything from him. The person we contacted was my father-in-law, my husband's father. We had been told he left due to infidelity, whereabouts unknown, but he was actually living in his family's home in the countryside. The divorce was caused by my mother-in-law's gambling and mismanagement of money. When my father-in-law decided to take over his family's farm, she immediately sought a divorce, which he readily agreed to. He had intended to take his son with him, but my mother-in-law disappeared with my husband. When he finally found them, she claimed my husband hated his father and didn't want to see him. He had been sending money ever since, just to fulfill his duty as a father. Even after I became an adult, you kept lying to Dad, claiming we were living together and continued to bill him. He was shocked. We've informed Dad that he no longer needs to pay anything. He said he doesn't want the money back that he paid after Mark was an adult, just to never contact him again. My mother-in-law's feeble murmur of "that can't be" was audible. My husband coldly delivered the final blow. "We're also stopping the support payments from our end. We're moving, and we don't want anything to do with you ever again." "What are you talking about? What about my living expenses? Repay me for raising you." Her voice screeched through the phone, breaking up with the intensity of her anger. My husband sighed once more and responded in a calm tone. "I believe we've repaid more than any debt for raising me. For over 15 years since I started working, I've used all my bonuses for you. From now on, I'll be using it for my own family." He said this and looked towards me. Although my mother-in-law was still ranting over the phone, my husband hung up without paying her any more attention. But our revenge was far from over. We began preparing for the second phase. About a week after my mother-in-law's call, she phoned again. She was terribly flustered and hard to understand, but in summary, she was complaining about the sale of the condo. As it turned out, my husband was her legal guardian, a fact that came to light during our investigations. Moreover, the loan for the condo purchase had been taken out in my husband's name. Since the condo was in my mother-in-law's name, but my husband had the legal right to sell it. We received confirmation from a lawyer that the sale was permissible, and we proceeded with the sale. The condo was bought by me. How dare you sell it without my permission? It was bought with our money, right? We've checked with the lawyer, and there's no issue. Despite her protests for us to return it or cancel the sale, my husband repeatedly explained that a buyer had been found and that the sale proceeds were rightfully ours. Still, my mother-in-law was far from satisfied, hurling insults over the phone. Unable to bear it any longer, I took the phone from my husband. "Hello, Susan. Please stop with the poor behavior. It's quite troubling. I'm the one who's troubled. The nerve of you, acting all high and mighty just because you're married to him. I thought you were well off and allowed the marriage, but you turned out to be nothing but a curse." As my mother-in-law yelled, I couldn't help but burst into loud laughter. She probably never expected me to laugh. The usually noisy mother-in-law fell silent. Still chuckling, I continued to speak. "Really, Susan, you're too careless. Making him your guardian and then taking a loan in his name is practically asking for it to be sold. We'll be taking back our money, and I hope we'll have no further dealings with you." Ignoring my mother-in-law's hesitant "wait, hold on." From the other end of the phone, I hung up. My husband, who had been anxiously watching, relaxed a bit when I smiled at him. 2 weeks later, we were informed that my mother-in-law had vacated the condo, and a new owner had moved in. We were relieved to see the sale proceeds safely deposited into my husband's account. Although we felt sorry for her potentially becoming homeless, we arranged for her to rent the same apartment she had lived in before as a form of severance, ensuring she wouldn't be on the streets. The landlord is a nice person but loves gossip, so she will likely spread all sorts of stories. But our revenge didn't end there. In fact, we had another plan underway beneath the surface. It seems it was executed right when my mother-in-law returned to her original apartment. My husband's phone, which had been ringing non-stop for about an hour after we received the moving completion notice from the movers, suddenly went silent. Then, a couple of hours later, he received a call from someone. "Hello? Yes, thank you very much. Please take care of it." After hanging up and letting out a sigh of relief, he gave me a thumbs up. The caller had been my mother-in-law's sister, Emily. We had contacted her as soon as we found out about the situation. She was furious on our behalf, even referring us to a lawyer. She also agreed to keep an eye on my mother-in-law after she moved back to her original apartment. Despite feeling a pang of sadness when Emily said she was a sweet sister once, we took her advice to steer clear of my mother-in-law for our happiness. On the day of the move, my mother-in-law didn't bother packing, even with the movers there. That's when Emily stepped in. To my mother-in-law's astonishment, Emily kicked her into action, forcing her to pack. Despite my mother-in-law's insistence that you are being deceived by my son and his wife. I'm the victim here. Emily was unimpressed and forcibly took her back to her previous apartment. Upon arriving at the apartment, my mother-in-law resisted. But when she was told that refusal would mean repaying all the previously lent money in one lump sum, she reportedly became compliant and followed instructions. It turned out that my mother-in-law had been extorting large sums not only from us and my father-in-law but also from Emily. Unaware of the full situation, Emily had been assisting her, believing she deserved support for the hardships endured in raising her son. Deceiving such a kind sister was unforgivable. It seems that Emily wasn't planning on just giving the money she lent to mother-in-law. And it's been arranged for mother-in-law to repay her out of her monthly salary. The amount she lent was so substantial that it might take a lifetime to repay. However, my mother-in-law has hardly ever worked, and she finds it difficult to secure even part-time employment. Moreover, on the rare occasions she does find a job, she tends not to stay long before quitting. Each time she quit, Emily would scold her, eventually securing her a daily part-time job at a friend's store. Despite claims of frail health, a forced medical examination revealed she was perfectly healthy and could work full-time. Having spent her life lying about working while enjoying leisure, this was a tough adjustment for her. And she was already struggling on the first day. When we received the message that the plan was complete, Emily was laughing, saying that Susan lacks backbone. As for us, we moved immediately after receiving the news from Emily that she had ushered my mother-in-law into the apartment. We relocated closer to my family home, and being at a distance that requires a plane ride has allowed us to live more peacefully. Our jobs have always been conducive to remote working, so both my husband and I have been able to continue our work without any issues. Being closer to my family home has increased our visits back, and my husband has become quite close to my father. My husband and I had discussed that it would be okay if we couldn't have children, but to our surprise, I discovered I was pregnant when I went to the doctor after feeling unwell as our lives began to settle down. My husband was astonished by the news, but now he is utterly captivated by our growing child with every checkup. I feel the same and have promptly applied for maternity and parental leave. We plan to take turns and raise our child with all the love we can give.